Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is May 22nd, Monday, May 22nd. Not the other kind of May 22nd. Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I guess tomorrow's the day to play 23 in the lottery. Good luck with the other 6 numbers. I can't help you. But I got maybe one of them is 20. I don't know. Anyway, time to get things underway here. Things going a little bit haywire at HQ, but as I mentioned in the Morning Post, this is it. I mean, get nostalgic for it, because this is the end of an era, the end of the time during which, the days during which there will be any scramble for the bus at morning start time are coming to an end. This is the last week. Technically, I guess next Tuesday, there's an opportunity to do this all again, but I think that this largely will not be taken. Most of the kids probably not even bothering attending for Tuesday after being off for the long weekend, the Memorial Day weekend coming up. They technically have 1 day of school left, and then graduation for the seniors, including our own, is on Wednesday of the week. I don't know why it's on Wednesday. There's a lot of graduations they have to go to. They got to coordinate it. A lot of schools in the district these days. You know that the Loudoun County School District has been much in the news. And one of the reasons is there are Wednesday graduations. Not really an issue, but, you know, I'm sure somebody threatened somebody else's life over it at any rate, because it's just routine now, apparently. Anyways, but this is it. The last of the week. This is senior week. A lot of special activities. Tomorrow, I don't think he'll be interrupting the show because he's got to get to school early for the senior class trip, and they'll be doing a totally different schedule and, essentially freaking us out during an entirely different part of the day. So looking forward to that. Hints about the week's news and the day's news from Justice as usual. Let's see. One of them, I think... I know what we're talking about. Jim Jordan, so mad about the Durham report, apparently, that he's going to investigate Hillary Clinton again. That's just straight up, that's the news. That's the headline. He spent some time on Fox News, I guess, melting down and screaming, according to the reports that I saw, that something and Durham report, obviously, blah, 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 going to lead him to investigating Hillary Clinton one more time. But, of course, now that subpoenas are optional for Congress, I'm not certain exactly how it'll be played, but Hillary Clinton to date has played it. I'll answer your questions. You're going to look dumb, but I'll do it. And I don't know. Then they all scream that they won. The other hint he dropped, this one I don't know about, but I guess I could have guessed it. I'll just say this. He's asking how many weathered former Vegas showgirls are there in Moms for Liberty? And I would have guessed that the entirety of Moms for Liberty was made up of ex-showgirls or the like. That's just the sort of people that they are. They do what they want to do while they're in their teens and 20s and 30s. And then to hell with everybody else. Everybody has to turn conservative Christian after that because that's what they did. And so there's really no other choice for the rest of you. Typical career arc. Actually, for some, although, some of them stay cool and swinging, I guess, but that's Vegas talk. Cool and swinging. Like all the kids in Vegas are constantly saying that. All right. Well, at any rate, we have, of course, the usual suspects. I suspect we have the same suspects. I'm not really certain about that. But if we did, they would be the usual ones. I'm not going to change my pattern. In terms of what has been rounded up for the Raft O stories over at Greg Dworkin World Headquarters. So, we're going to be talking about, as you might imagine, the debt ceiling confrontation continues. Certainly be talking about that, again, as promised, with Joan McCarter tomorrow, unless, of course, I don't know, either the whole thing gets solved or, I don't know, Joan finds something better to do. That could happen, too. So, all right. Well, Greg Dworkin is here, and I think we almost have the high schooler out the door for his late drive. Thanks to the production staff for agreeing to take him to school one more time before it all ends. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. We're doing fine. Just to let you know, for some reason, at least at my end, your sound is fading in and out. A message for justice.
I'm passing out.
That has nothing to do with you.
But
maybe it's just sunspots. These things
Oh,
happen.
yeah, that's true. The sun is exploding, everybody. End of the earth, whatever.
Yeah, in some, 50 billion years or whatever.
Eventually, it was going to happen anyway. I mean, today,
people got nervous
50
because they
billion
thought you said
years
15
away.
billion, and thought it was a little sooner
Right.
than that.
Oh, that's right. I have to realign my investments somehow.
Yeah, exactly right. So today's pundit roundup was basically about what the major topic was all weekend, which is the debt ceiling crisis.
Yes, well, yeah, we continue to work sort of on that. Newspapers report things.
Topic
we
A
watch
until
it.
it gets settled. But the annoying thing about it, of course, is the media coverage, and that's really what I concentrated on this morning.
I thought for sure they'd get it right this time.
Well, no. So let's start with Dan Pfeiffer, who has some interesting things to say. He's got a Substack called The Message Box. And, of course, Substack is a fancy monetized way of saying blog.
Right.
Because
I'm not sure how, but apparently there's money in it.
Yeah. Debt limit update. McCarthy's very weak hand, he writes. The speaker's talking tough to appease the right, but he needs the Democrats to bail him out. And he writes, as recently as Thursday morning, I expressed a modicum of cautious optimism about the United States avoiding its first ever default. White House negotiators met with House Republicans and seemed to be making progress, and while I had concerns about the contents of a deal, a budget agreement to lift the debt ceiling was quite possible, and it wasn't just me. Washington and Wall Street were feeling good. The market had even been trending up on the expectation that a financial catastrophe would be averted.
Okay.
And then Friday came. Friday morning, optimism turned to panic. The negotiators hit an impasse and paused further discussions. The Republicans announced that they were pushing the pause button.
Yes.
And because all of the gossip sheets take their lead from whatever the Republicans say, it was therefore all Biden's fault, and he was going to cave, except he didn't cave, and we're really upset because he's not caving. So what we're going to do is, because we figured he was going to cave, said the Republicans, we're going to make it even more of a right-wing ask, because why not? He's caving anyway.
Yeah,
and then he didn't cave, and then we panicked because we don't have a plan B. So we're less than 2 weeks away from the so-called X date when the U.S. could run out of money, default on its debts, and spark the most devastating unforced error in history. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is like a lifetime in politics.
Right.
Over the weekend.
Very short period of time.
Yeah. Talks. It's not like the 50 billion years for the sun to explode.
Right. I mean,
15 billion
earlier.
35 nanoseconds or wherever it is. Over the weekend, talks were back on, then they were off, then last night they were on again.
Exciting.
Is this theater? Are we screwed? Should we panic? Should we buy gold? Get we our money in the backyard? Well, here's what you need to know based on my experience working in the White House during the last two Republican-engineered debt ceiling crises. Number one, only the GOP can avoid default. In other words, the Democrats don't want default. Only the GOP wants it. So since they're in the House and they're the ones who write the legislation, they're the ones that can avoid default. And if they don't avoid default, it's their fault that they didn't avoid default.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in the word.
For decades, Congresses of both parties lifted the debt ceiling with a scant amount of drama. Kevin McCarthy and his band of MAGA extremists chose a different path. It's that simple. Everything else is noise. And I would add, that's how media should cover it.
I agree.
Biden is under pressure to cave.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know why they...
Republicans are, in fact, holding the U.S. and its good name hostage. Treat them as such. Number two, he points out this is typical-ish.
Typical-ish. Okay.
Right. Number three, they're already back to the table, by the way. He said if they're not back to the table early next week, start worrying, but they're already back to the table.
They never really left, but okay.
And number three, Kevin McCarthy's playing a weak hand. And that's really the part I wanted to hone in on. In one sense, McCarthy has all the cards because the crux of his argument is give me everything I want or I'll blow up the economy. But it's legislative thuggery. And Kevin McCarthy is actually operating from a very weak position. The Limit, Save, and Grow Act, the GOP debt limit bill that McCarthy narrowly passed a few weeks ago, can't pass the Democratic Senate. McCarthy reportedly and stupidly promised House Freedom Caucus the Limit, Save, and Grow Act was the floor, not the ceiling of what they could accept. The Freedom Caucus is already freaking out and already called on McCarthy to abandon negotiations, but Donald Trump weighed in to do the same. And all of this means that McCarthy needs Democrats to pass a budget agreement. Now, he can talk tough all he wants, but ultimately he needs Joe Biden, Hakeem Jeffries, to save his bacon. The price of that rescue will further inflame the Freedom Caucus and the far-right members of his caucus. And my guess, Dan Pfeiffer's guess, is that once the Democrats started exploiting that leverage, McCarthy panicked and ran from the table.
Okay. Is that what
Our current state of affairs is quite precarious, but that's almost entirely the fault of irresponsible Republicans led by a weak and insecure speaker. So those are his points.
Yeah, okay. Well, we need some people to listen to them.
Yeah, especially those who write stories.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. Well, we will listen, and some of us write stories, I guess. So talk to your other friends who write stories.
Right. Political Playbook says congressional Republicans have not only rejected a new White House offer to essentially freeze domestic spending at fiscal year 2023 levels.
Yeah, ordinarily a pretty good deal. I mean, for that.
You know, the price of eggs goes up, so does everything else. So generally, the budget goes up with it. So the idea that you freeze at last year's level or lower it, which is what McCarthy wants, not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, when it gets offered to you, that's about as far as anybody can go.
But they're now demanding work requirements for SNAP recipients that are more rigid than those they originally proposed. And by the way, every expert who looked at it from the 60s on, when this stuff started,
yes,
doesn't work.
No, it also doesn't pay any bills. I mean, it's just, one, it doesn't do much in the way of
it doesn't get people
work.
off welfare. It doesn't save money. It doesn't incentivize people to work. It does nothing.
Yeah,
it's all smoke and mirrors. They're also insisting on adding new immigration provisions from the GOP's recently passed border bill, which, mind you, Republicans didn't include in their own debt ceiling bill. And the GOP's dug-in position comes at the end of a week when both President Joe Biden and Speaker Kevin McCarthy acknowledged that a budget deal would have to be bipartisan. That means Democratic votes. That means what Dan Pfeiffer was saying is truth.
Okay, I mean, the House is
right.
Republican.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene
Democratic.
doesn't get to set the parameters of what you vote on. She's not going to be the deciding vote. Vote counters on the Hill believe any eventual deal will need the backing of about 100 House Democrats, since a number of conservatives will never support a compromise. But given what Republican negotiators are now countering, they're far from that number. So the White House isn't happy with the new GOP demands. This morning, which was a couple of days ago, Biden told reporters the GOP needs to move off their extreme positions, added the aforementioned source. Just days after publicly acknowledging that any budget agreement would need the support of both parties, the Speaker's team has taken a big step backwards with a set of extreme partisan demands that doesn't reflect any movement after days of negotiations and that they know will never pass both houses of Congress. Now, what happens is, they have more. So the step back, it's worth taking a moment to consider and weigh what each side has done. The Democrats have all but publicly acknowledged that a clean debt ceiling increase is not going to happen. They signaled a willingness to claw back unspent COVID funding, which is fine. They consider overhauling permitting reform, which is too big asks by Republicans. They'll consider it, but the two sides have different ways on how they want to do permitting reform, so that's not a done deal yet. They opened a door to spending cuts, which is a central plank of Republicans' House-passed bill. That's not unusual in these things. If it's like to save the economy, we'll put a freeze on for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You can say you got what you wanted, and then everybody's happy, and we go about our business. Okay, it's a year, not 3 weeks, but it's still not, anything like to blow the whole thing up about. So Biden's expressed a willingness to consider work requirements for certain safety net programs, though Biden also suggested he'd reject these if Republicans insist on protecting wealthy tax cheats. So everybody's expecting Biden to cave. He hasn't caved.
Okay.
And every time they say, well, he's caving on these work requirements. Yeah, but he's asking in return that they increase taxes on the wealthy. What?
Or
you can't do
even
that.
Just collect them.
We've already written our story. Biden caved.
Right. I can't erase the headline and use different letters. That's weird. And I don't have any computers to just instantly change the lettering. I can't do that.
Meanwhile, the Republicans continue to push for a spending cap three times longer than any such agreement struck in recent budget deals. They haven't pressed forward on two big demands of the House GOP bill, which is undoing provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act and student debt relief. They haven't gone there, which is quite interesting that they haven't gone there on debt relief. Insist that remember, Biden's never going to do it. He didn't have the courage to do it. He's never going to do it. Well, he did it, and now Republicans aren't trying to undo it.
Well,
remember that Ute vote. Remember that fellow kids vote.
Oh, yeah, right. That's true. I mean, we keep saying, it turns out they're actually coming out. Oh, they might
insist
like
that Democrats actually increase Pentagon border and veterans-related spending, necessitating even steeper cuts to non-defense programs. Rejected Democrats' demands to close tax loopholes and are doubling down on work requirements. They're also demanding new immigration provisions and rejected a White House offer to reduce spending via prescription drug reform. So it's worth noting the Biden White House's concessions have already infuriated some of their own allies on the Hill. The White House appears to be waiting for the GOP to let go of some of its demands, which will, of course, anger some conservatives, but which the administration argues is necessary to broker a deal.
Okay.
So everybody is still on their wish list, Overton window, here's what I want demand. So we really don't know what the deal looks like. But if Republicans, in fact, do have to give up something to get this done, that makes whatever so-called concessions Biden makes or has to make a lot less onerous. If you get something in return for it, it's not caving. It's a simple negotiation where you decided that this is the best deal you could get.
Yes.
Again, that's how the media should be covering this. Not Biden's ready to cave. Democrats are furious. Biden is caving. I can't believe Biden caved. This is a pre-cave because I'm already mad because he hasn't caved yet, but I know he will. That's all garbage.
It certainly doesn't make any work any easier. But yeah, I mean, if it's your thing that ground is given on, it's going to feel like a cave. You're going to be interested in calling it a cave.
Well, you have to see what else you got. Now, if you get nothing, it's a cave.
Well, okay.
Right? And if you get something, it's a negotiation. That's a simple concept that Washington runs on, and everybody who ignores it is ignoring reality.
Okay. I think that's a good definition.
I still like the 14th Amendment, but that's besides the point. That's what you do when McCarthy refuses to budge.
Yes.
And you don't have the votes, but you'll have the votes from Democrats. Now, there's still that discharge petition that's hanging out there.
Oh, well, yes, there is. It exists.
Right. So, I mean, you're talking about that's 14th Amendment level Plan C, Plan D.
Yeah.
But it's there. And it's either of those is better than having the country default on debt.
Yes. So there was heightened talk about that over the weekend. And, it's still a saleable plan. I mean, you just say, you could take a page, if you want, from the Trump playbook on it and say, listen, I don't know for sure whether this 14th Amendment thing works or doesn't work. My people say it does. But to tell you what, we're going to, rather than default, at the last second, rather than default, I'm just going to do that. And if I'm wrong, the courts will tell us we're wrong. It'll take a little while.
That's Trump's approach. Biden's approach would be, ladies and gentlemen and members of the public, in sorrow rather than anger. Mm-hmm. I really need to make sure that people understand that the basic principle here is that the U.S. does not default on its debts. The U.S. doesn't welsh on its bills. Mm. I'm doing whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to make sure that the economy doesn't collapse, the global economy doesn't collapse.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be done. And if you don't like it, take me to court.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's room for a little bit of Trumpism in it, And honestly, at this point, you say, I'll tell you what, we're going to do it. Maybe I'm wrong. Hey,
I would much rather. So this is where Biden comes in and Trump would never say. I would much rather have negotiated with the Republicans. I made every effort. I bent over backwards twice on Sundays. They still wouldn't budge. Not my fault.
Right. And so, the alternative was default. I say no. And I'll tell you what, if the Supreme Court says, you know what, yes, destroy the world economy, then what can I tell you? It's on them. But here are the 9 people who are going to decide it. I did everything I could do. If they're going to say, to hell with money, nobody gets to have any anymore, and we're all going back to the Stone Age,
But I
here are
say
your
never
guys.
blame the Supreme Court when you can blame Republicans.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that might be the same thing at this
Don't
point.
diffuse it.
And say, it's not. And when it happens, if it were to happen, it's not the Supreme Court. I can tell you who's going to vote. No, go ahead, save the world, save the country, save the economy. It's the Supreme Court justices who've been appointed by Democrats. The ones to watch are the guys from Republicans and Trump. Yeah, I still think, I don't like putting anything past them anymore because they're kind of bonkers. But they love money and luxury, apparently. We've been learning a lot about that. And if you say, there's no more luxury yacht trips for anybody anywhere, for anything, because there's no more money and the world economy collapses, well, I do love being bribed.
Yeah, that's right. You can just be a little bit more explicit about it. Having the world economy collapse would break Harlan Crow. So Clarence Thomas is with us.
Yeah, right. So, you could vote that way. Crash the economy, go ahead, whatever. But it's the end of the gravy train, and we're finding more and more of you are, comfortably seated on this gravy train. It ends.
Right. So in terms of style points, Jennifer Rubin has a piece. Biden uses good cop, bad cop against the GOP's debt ceiling extortion.
All right.
And I should note, a more a less opinion reporter and a more straight reporter, Catherine Rampell from Washington Post, who focuses on economic matters, says, I wish more of the coverage of debt ceiling negotiations focused less on internecine political dramas and more on the global economic consequences of default, as well as what House Republicans are actually demanding in exchange for not defaulting. Well, we went over just now what the House Republicans are actually demanding.
I wish.
But the fact of the matter is,
science,
it would be really bad if we defaulted, and Biden's right to do anything possible by any means necessary in order to make sure that does not happen. And that's, that's resolute with a backbone. That's not caving.
Yeah. Well, she's got an interesting approach to it. I wish people were paying attention to facts and policy and science.
Right.
Me too.
Back to Jennifer Rubin. She says, MAGA Republicans attempted to hold the country hostage for demands for unfeasible and unpopular cuts that would savage everything from healthcare to border enforcement to veterans benefits. Yeah. President Biden swore up and down there'd be no negotiations over the debt ceiling. Now, with no debt ceiling hike locked in, White House representatives are negotiating with McCarthy's aides. The media were quick to pounce, awarding McCarthy a political win. The New York Times intoned, Speaker McCarthy got what he wanted out of Tuesday's debt limit talks, the chance to go one-on-one against President Biden. But that take misses the full picture. As negotiations continued, a group of House Democrats got the bill rolling on a discharge petition, and several Democrats implored Biden to use the 14th Amendment. Did Biden lose the high ground? Are reckless Republicans who endangered the economy getting away with their reprehensible stunt? For starters, Biden never said he wouldn't negotiate with the Republicans. He said a debt ceiling bill had to pass. For months, he said he wouldn't negotiate over the debt ceiling, but he would talk about spending cuts. Only when McCarthy brought up and passed the spending bill did the president agree to serious negotiations. Again, that's perfectly reasonable. The idea that everything that Biden did was a cave from the beginning is just wrong.
All right.
It's just wrong.
I guess I'll stop saying that it was. I don't know.
Okay. You stop right now. Because you've been saying it since the beginning of this. Actually, you haven't said it at all. But,
I was thinking of starting.
Start saying it.
Okay.
The White House and six Republicans moved toward the president in finally passing a spending plan. Certainly the White House did flush out Republicans, although the latter voted on a spending plan, not a complete budget. That said, the White House's rhetoric early on did sound more intransigent than was feasible given the reality of the divided government. Put differently, Biden might have avoided the perception of a climb down had he said, we can talk about spending, but at the end of the day, I'll use whatever means necessary to protect the economy.
I do feel like we have said this.
Right?
All right. Yeah. All right. She's caving on his not caving.
Right.
In this.
The true test will come if and when a default deal materializes. If Biden avoids making cuts, essentially agreeing to a continuing resolution, but no implementation of counterproductive work requirements, it would amount to a huge win for the president. I don't think that'll happen. I think it'll be more balanced.
But thanks for setting it up, Jen.
A bipartisan deal that leaves its agenda in place and puts to bed the default issue would give him the best outcome. If a deal included, however, those untenable work requirements or rolled back aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act, a Democratic backlash would surely ensue, risking the default Biden had hoped to avoid. So he benefits from playing good cop, bad cop, while his emissaries talk to Republicans, a discharge petition, a proposal to invoke the 14th, and pressure the 18 Republicans from districts Biden won can ensure Biden need not give away much. That gives him the best chance to avoid imperiling a stunning economic recovery or rewarding Republicans for their temper tantrum. So it's not over yet. And, the thing is, I'm not predicting how this is going to go. I'm not insisting Biden's already won.
Well, and I'm not
what I'm
listening
saying
anymore.
is, since we really have no idea how this is going to go, it's just premature to claim it's a cave already.
Well, okay. That part I have to agree with. The part about where you're not going to predict where it's going to go. What are we here for, if not to guess wildly? I don't know if we have any good guesses, but
I don't really know,
14th
because
Amendment's a good one.
the part that's hardest to figure out are moderate Democrats and the so-called moderate Republicans, which basically they're to the right of Mitt Romney moderate.
Yes.
And what they're actually going to do when it comes time to a vote on the floor. I don't really care what they say. I want to know what they do.
Yeah, well, right. That would be ridiculous at this point. Not
And all
enough
we're
time to
getting
think
is
about what
what
they're
they say.
saying. Yes.
And they're not saying anything.
Right. Although, I guess if we do have to predict something, then we have to pay attention to what they're saying, because that's all there is to go on, I guess.
All right. You want a prediction? A prediction is
all right.
that something passes, but it's with Democratic votes. And McCarthy then has to deal with his caucus.
Oh, all right. That's a prediction. Why not? I hadn't
Caucus
thought of that
conference.
one. Okay. Well, I was hoping for a prediction about, the sun explodes.
Eventually.
There's no currency.
We'll get a deal eventually.
That's right. Well, we just need a 15 billion year continuing resolution.
It's a race. It's a race against the clock. And we're not talking about 2 weeks before we run out of money. We're talking about now versus the sun exploding.
Well, I think we can win that one.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue to inquire about what the hell happens if all currency disappears, essentially, and we're back to barter.
Well, then we're back to crypto.
All right. Well, no.
That's what they want.
I guess. Just computers generating heat for no reason.
Right. So anyway, we'll see what happens. It's we got a few days of putting up with the garbage of the gossip sheets, just telling us the minute by minute, oh, this guy changed his mind. Oh,
Yes.
he didn't. Oh, he said this, but then he's going to vote that.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me. Yeah, well, later on, I'll have an excellent example of why the gossip sheets are so annoying. I mean, I guess you already have an implicit sense about why they're so annoying, but I have another story specifically about
Well,
why
tell
they're
us
so annoying.
now.
Oh, all right. Well, okay. The thing I saw over the weekend from Axios, that's a garbage gossip
one
sheet.
step up from Punch Bowl and Political Playbook.
So this one I saw over the weekend. I think Melissa Ryan had circulated this one on Mastodon, and the thing that it always cracks me up whenever Axios is writing one of their stories, and they do that. They love their little templates, right? Why it matters,
Why it matters.
zoom in, right? nothing could highlight the absurdity of this structure better, and so therefore illustrate a second important point about the media, which is when we say, in general, they have no idea how to deal with Trump and still have no idea how to deal with Trump. And when everybody says, yeah, I know. But I mean, he's hard to know how to deal with, or what do you mean they don't know exactly how to deal with? What do you want them to do? Well, we debate it. We want them to treat him like a serious danger, essentially.
Like a serial killer.
Yeah. And so nothing illustrates it better than having to report through their stupid template, which of course, I guess the brass at Axios thinks, no, this is what cuts through and clarifies and makes us valuable, is that we use this template. So here is Sophia Cal. Is that right? Or Kai? Let me zoom in. Kai. Yes. C-A-I. I can't tell. The type's so small. I'm 100 years old. Trump's 2025 vision revealed is the headline they're using. So I guess, I don't know. Did he do a rally? Did he do a thing? Maybe it's reflective of the CNN town hall even. I don't even know why they even did the article, actually, which is another question mark. So they're basically saying, I want you to do one of these why it matters things on what he's outlining as his platform for the 2024 race, which is crazy because his platform for the 2024 race is crazy. So they take it this way. And they start out normalizing, right? Former President Trump's second term governing plans are coming into clearer focus, which is wrong. And the opposite of her conclusion later on, as he lays out a vision for a dramatic expansion of federal power, particularly the presidency, which again normalizes. This is an enormous autocratic dictatorial power grab over personal grievances is what's happening. And they're hammering it into shape like, well, it's coming into clearer focus, and he's proposing a dramatic expansion of federal power. It's not, seizing the reins of power and ending the government as we know it, but an expansion, though. And then, of course, why it matters, right? So why it matters is this is a dictatorship that he's describing, and we're against dictatorship because while you might be in favor at the moment of the policies that the dictator is proposing, later on, if you disagree with the dictator, there's no way to get rid of him and he'll murder you. That's why it matters. But that's not why it matters for Axios. For Axios, why it matters is that, well, in public statements, videos, and posts on his campaign website, Trump complains about Washington's swamp, but lays out a plan that would give him, as president, more control of virtually every facet of life in America. So that's sort of inching towards, well, it's bad because dictatorship, but they don't actually go there. But then they just drop it, right? Next section, zoom in. And so they look at the stupid policies, and all the dumb policies. Pardon all the January 6th people, end aid to Ukraine. But then the super crazy ones come up. I can fire anybody in the federal workforce at will, federal takeover of education, and we'll have the 1776 curriculum and more law enforcement, and you get to beat people, but we'll defund the people who are investigating me, and yada yada, and no pronouns. And then finally, the really super crazy one that really elevates it to a future dystopia movie part where I'm going to build the 10 freedom cities around we're going to take abandoned land, and I'm going to build gleaming skyscrapers where the cops get to kick the crap out of you.
Well, they could have said why it matters. They could have just said, look, as far as the swamp goes, Trump has decided he wants to be the largest alligator, and if you don't like it, he'll eat you.
But they don't, right? Whatever. Why it matters? Well, the plans are coming into clearer focus, right. Which they're really not. And then, so at the end, they have to wrap it up, right? So they do reality check. Okay. So now all of these stupid things he said, I'm going to seize control of this, seize control of that, build freedom cities from the dust, and the reality check. Many of Trump's ideas are outlined in broad strokes, without details of how they'd be implemented or funded. Period.
Reality
the
check.
End.
They could have added, Bill Cassidy said on Sunday, Trump will never be president.
Oh, well, that could be a reality.
There's your reality.
They could have added that, and they did. There's the next section. This is what they're saying, but they didn't quote him. They quoted Norm Ornstein, who also really didn't do a very good job with it. But I mean, this to put this out there and to say he's going to seize control of every aspect of American life, and he claims he's going to generate 10 new freedom cities from the dust. And they said, a reality check, how's he going to pay for it? That's the reality check. How about the reality check is all of these things are unconstitutional and would represent the complete dissolution of the United States of America. And the people would be perfectly justified in seizing him bodily and deposing him from power, should that even be discussed.
Speaking of deposing, reality check is though he's unlikely to be in jail by the time of the next election. Trump will certainly be indicted more than once.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that was interesting. And also, by the way, for her to say, well, remember, the reason I'm reporting on this is because his plans are coming into clearer
and it's
focus.
really important. It's breaking news, sirens.
Yeah. Right. He had this thing a week and a half ago, but they're coming into clearer focus. By the way, my conclusion in the reality check is they're really not coming into clearer focus. And the whole premise of my article has just been reversed. But see ya. I don't know. Just for Axios to treat
Here's
that.
a series of reality checks because they like to do it in bullet points.
All right.
Bill Cassidy says Trump is never going to be president. When media is criticized for not knowing how to cover Trump or having unlearned or not learned anything from 2016 onward, please see this article.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good point too, right? I mean, he is a United States senator. As dopey as he is, I mean, why is that not a huge headline?
He's a Republican. He's a conservative.
But all right, maybe Trump will attack him for having said it. Then it'll be a headline. Then they'll pay attention.
Speaking of why he won't be president, I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be president, but this week is likely the week that Ron DeSantis jumps in the race. Tim Scott jumps in the race. Chris Sununu and Chris Christie are waiting in the rings. Chris Sununu said there's a 61% chance he'll run for president.
Boy. What is that?
Chris Christie, is 100% chance, or
okay, 61%. Maybe that's intriguing.
Given the size of his ego, maybe you'd say Chris Christie has 110% chance of running.
Sure, why not?
What does all of that mean? Are any of them going to? The governor of North Dakota is thinking about running. They all see Trump as being a relatively good candidate, even though he's very strong within their party, and they're afraid of his voters, not him. Nonetheless. The point is, if you have a lineup of people willing to run against Trump, one of them or some of them may wind up doing some attack-style things.
Somebody
that
has to say that's a lane,
all the way
right?
to November election.
Okay, I mean, right?
Chris Christie in particular.
That's the theory. You need a lane. I'm going to attack him about.
I'm the assassin lane. Look how I took out Marco Rubio, says Chris Christie. and the GOP says, you're right. How about we don't do debates? That way we don't have to invite you.
Okay.
It would satisfy Trump, who doesn't want to do them. And it would satisfy the rest of us because we're afraid you'll actually tell the truth. We don't want that because those will all be used in attack ads by the Democrats in November. So how about rather than disinvite only you, we just don't have debates at all?
That could happen.
That way Chris Sununu can't say anything bad about Trump.
Yeah. In a way, that would be somewhat funny. But then I also worry that would actually facilitate his nomination somehow. So, I mean, I guess I don't want to root for that.
That's why they would do it.
Yeah. Then, of course, we're going to hold the debates anyway, and Trump will just boycott the debate and say that he, like he did last time when he didn't like the terms.
But that's what Axios needs to do and doesn't do. Why it matters. Trump is a very weak candidate who needs every possible edge in order to try and squeeze out a win, to claw himself into a win. And what the Republicans are doing right now is to try to give him that edge. That's what they should say in terms of the reality check and why it matters.
I think you're right. You should go there and tell them that. Yeah, it is weird that, the normalization exercise continues unabated. It's crazy.
Right. And even if you're going to be totally obsessed about horse race rather than, okay, who are these candidates and why is the candidacy matters? Tim Scott has a story to tell, like it or not. He's a relative, moderate, conservative, black Republican who has a great life story, who everybody likes because he's supposedly a nice guy. Yeah, which is why John Thune is endorsing him over Trump or DeSantis.
He's not a nice guy.
Well, his fellow senators really like him.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Are we hearing about that? No, we're hearing about the horse race. We're hearing about, Tim Scott's coming in and he's polling at like 0.9 negative%.
Yeah, well, talk about what a nice guy.
Well, he'll get a bump, and so will Ron DeSantis. And so will anybody who decides that they're going to, like Nikki Haley did.
You know, it occurs
So
to me.
frickin' what?
Having seen or I didn't see it this year, but having watched in the past the Kentucky Derby, speaking of horse race, you actually get a longer, more in-depth background on the horses in a horse race than you do in the candidates in horse race coverage.
Don't even talk about.
I would love to have horse race coverage. An hour before the actual debate, they tell you the stories of, where each of these candidates was born.
6 of them die and one of them's disqualified and 3 are on drugs. That's the kind of stuff you ought to be knowing about
in a lot of ways. That's true. But I always feel like I know plenty about it. I know why the jockey's wearing this colors. I know where the horse was born and who the parents were. I wish we got horse race coverage. That's crazy. All right. Well, if I keep talking about it, they're just going to ruin the horse race shows. So,
well, look, the business is what the business is, and it's got issues. But, that's also true for horse race.
Right. If people were breaking legs in debates, though, I don't know.
Right. Well, if you want to see the greatest athlete of all time.
All right.
Just go watch Secretariat Race.
Oh, okay.
Plenty of stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now there's
good movies too. So if you want a better angle, they'll fake one for you with CGI, and it's really great. But true, excellent, wonderful athlete. We don't forget about
so good to cover Axios.
The horse's
good
race.
To really highlight how badly the regular media, print and especially cable, is doing on covering what's happening with the current Biden administration, both in terms of the current crisis and also in terms of the race to come. Right. Here's another area where they're doing pretty badly. This is from the Washington Post this morning. Again, Jennifer Rubin.
All right.
Bragg shows a few cards. Critics should reconsider their gripes. When Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg filed a 34-count indictment against disgraced former President Donald Trump for alleged falsification of business records stemming from hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels, pundits across the political spectrum were dismissive and disdainful. How dare he concoct an exotic theory to indict an ex-president? You'd think the Manhattan DA had never filed cases of this type.
All right.
As Just Security explained at the time, quote, for Trump to be prosecuted for felony violation of falsifying business records, the statute requires the DA to prove not only that Trump's guilty of falsifying business records, which is a misdemeanor, but that he did so with the intent to commit another crime. Everybody now knows that. Well, it's never been a great mystery what those other crimes might be, but Bragg spelled out in writing a whole list of criminal statutes this week that elevate the misdemeanor falsification charges, including, quote, violations of New York election law. What are these? Are these Pilcrows and Silcrows here? I don't know what they are. It's funny squiggly things.
Those are Silcrows,
New York election law 17152, New York tax law double whatever it was, 1801A3 and 1802, and then New York penal law, again, the double Silcrow. 175.05 and 175.10.
That's just
or violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act, 52 U.S.C. 30101, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It all to wit, to woo, as
Viz.
Groucho Marx might say.
Yeah, okay. The Silcrows are just section.
Yeah.
That's all.
Anyway.
Pilcrows are the paragraph ones.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, a whole lot. Every time.
There's a whole lot of different specific.
That's how you know the law is going to get you.
Violations of New York election law and New York penal law. Mm-hmm. Giving particulars as to his legal theories was wise. It provided Trump due process and made it easier for Bragg to avoid delay as a result of needless litigation, said Andrew Weissman.
Uh-huh.
Now, former Los Angeles prosecutor Joshua Ritter told Newsweek the election and tax laws that Bragg's office has cited as underlying crimes are fairly straightforward. The election laws simply involve using unlawful means to gain an advantage in a political campaign and failing to disclose how funds are used. The tax statutes relate to submitting false or fraudulent information in a tax return. So it's pretty easy to see how Trump might have committed those crimes. And because New York law does not limit the crimes that might elevate a business records claim to state law claims, it was easily anticipated that Bragg would include state and federal finance laws.
Yeah.
Now, they want to call that exotic? Bragg says we use another word here, guilty.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how exotic it has to be. This is criminal activity. You're supposed to pay your taxes. You're supposed to be honest about where your money comes from, and you're supposed to obey campaign finance laws. and he didn't do any of those things. What's the problem? Why do you have such a hard time understanding this?
Ryan Goodman, New York University law professor and Just Security's co-founder, told me, it goes to show how much some of the early criticisms of the DA following the indictment were overwrought and unfounded. He continued, as a defendant, Trump's always had the right to ask for a bill of particulars, and Bragg responded expeditiously in outlining the specific crimes for Trump to prepare a defense. So, yeah, he did stuff.
He's normalizing
and Bragg
Trump.
says it was illegal, and you're indicted for it. And there's nothing phony or bogus or made up or flimsy about it.
Yeah.
It's just different than what my friend Fani Willis is going to indict you for in August.
Awesome. I can't wait.
He didn't add that, but that's what he was thinking.
Yeah, I can well believe it. By the way, that's a thing for Trump to try. Like, you're following normal legal procedures. Why are you normalizing Trump? How dare you?
Right. Now,
the
other
among
indictments.
Democrats.
Okay, Fani Willis is in August. Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, wasn't
and
it
there's
July?
A couple of really good reasons. She had to settle the whole issue with who was going to be representing the false electors.
Because
there was some question about disqualifying one of the lawyers, but that's been settled. That took a while. The grand jury has its own rhythm in 2-month increments. She had to set it up so that there's some security involved, so that people are safe, and that's why she put the courthouses on notice that August is the thing.
Okay.
And she also has to work with Jack Smith to coordinate who's suing who for what, under what circumstance, and who gets to, make sure that my case doesn't ruin your case, and we're speaking to the same witnesses, and what if they say different things, and all that sort of stuff.
So it's not just everybody showboating and out for themselves and ruin everyone else's case. She's taking it seriously, and that takes time? Wow.
Yeah.
That's weird.
All of that. So that's why until August. In the meantime, Jack Smith has, of course, the January 6th case, which is going to take a long time to make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and all the different Trump people who were invited to flip have a chance to flip. And by the way, speaking of Bragg, he's also putting an incredible amount of pressure on Alan Weisselberg, threatening to send him back to jail unless he flips.
Right.
But,
I did see that over the weekend.
Jack Smith might well be ready with his Mar-a-Lago case. Pretty much everybody who needs to do stuff has already done stuff, so I'm waiting for that to drop any day now.
Oh. All right. He's moving with greater dispatch. I think in signing all the official documents, it takes a lot less time to write Jack Smith than Robert S. Mueller III, and that's really been the big difference.
Right.
It's just that.
And going over it several times to make sure you spelled Mueller right.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that could be also.
Jack Smith's a lot easier.
Yeah, all right. Well, it saves time. We can
so
get in
I do
with
think
this.
indictments are coming, and I think it's,
that's a prediction.
It's reasonable to take your time and do it right and make sure everything is lined up and so on and so forth. But some of the demands on people like Merrick Garland have been incredibly unreasonable. And watching the pig's breakfast that Durham made of his report, I'm so glad that they're taking their time and doing it right.
Not that Durham didn't take his time, I must say.
Yeah, it took 4 years.
Yeah.
And he still made a pig's breakfast.
I guess sometimes that doesn't
taking
help.
a few extra weeks, that's okay.
I guess so. Yeah. And I guess if you're a cynic, you could say, well, look, taking extra time by itself doesn't mean anything. But you also have to be a serious person with a serious charge, and Durham just didn't fit that bill. He wasn't doing anything that was worthwhile.
He was charged with exonerating Trump. I mean, that's what Bill Barr told him to do, and take whatever time and whatever money you need to do it. He failed.
But he did ask, seriously? And I don't know what the answer was to that, but he did do it. All right. And he's done now, and I don't know exactly what the connection is, but I did read that Jim Jordan now says, something, and I guess we'll be investigating Hillary Clinton again, which I guess
good luck, Elon.
That's the way she approaches it. I'll come and do your testifying thing. Are we going to do another 11 hours, or can we keep it under 10 this time?
Right. You want to make yourself look like an idiot? Go right ahead. This next piece is from Will Bunch, Philadelphia Inquirer, opinion columnist. Why was this massive Trump scandal hiding in plain sight for 28 months? A shocking allegation that then President Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani was selling pardons for $2 million got lost, and why it matters now. Remember,
Axios,
Rudy Giuliani is in the news because of salacious
Yes.
accusations by somebody who worked for him,
Yeah.
who, by the very fact that they worked for him, in my view, makes them suspect in terms of what they're doing and what they want.
True. But then we enjoy it when they say things like, yeah, he kept pulling his pants down.
Well, yeah, the stuff on Borat actually happened. I mean, I get all of that.
Right. Yeah.
And it may
but
be
it's
because
suspect.
she
That's
simply
okay.
wants money from him, and this is her way of squeezing him for it. I don't know. But
maybe.
as part of that,
Yeah. I'm okay with that, by the way.
Will Bunch writes, it's remarkable in hindsight that Donald Trump even showed up for work during the last week of his presidency.
Yeah.
Trump had to race through some important unfinished business before the clock struck noon on January 20th, Biden's inauguration day. The night before, the ongoing president issued 144 pardons and commutations as he wielded one of his few utterly unchecked powers granted in the U.S. Constitution. Indeed, looking just at pardons, Trump issued 116 of just 143 during his 4 years in office in the final month.
Okay, yes. Big rush at the end.
Right?
I mean, he
At the
was
very
working
end,
on them.
Trump ignored the practices of past presidents who'd worked mostly off petitions that had been investigated by the Justice Department's Office of the Pardon Attorney, and granted clemency largely for connected folks that he tended to know. Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, Rod Blago, the disgraced Illinois governor who we knew from reality TV, his son-in-law's dad, Charles Kushner. Then there was an additional category, those who'd paid good money to Trump world insiders to plead their case. On January 17, 2021,
very late.
Well, 2 years ago, the New York Times published an article headline, Prospect of Pardons in Final Days Fuels Market to Buy Access to Trump. Times had that story.
Well,
how come we haven't really heard about it?
Yeah, I don't know.
The Times passage about convicted ex-CIA leaker John Kiriakou, who paid an unnamed Trump associate $50,000 with a contingent promise of $50,000 more if a pardon was granted.
Yeah.
Included a jaw-dropping, if unproven, allegation. Mr. Kiriakou was separately told Mr. Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, could help him secure a pardon for $2 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mr. Kiriakou rejected the offer, but an associate, fearing Mr. Giuliani was illegally selling pardons, alerted the FBI. Mr. Giuliani challenged his characterization, quote, unquote.
Mm-hmm. And then he took his pants off, which was weird.
But that allegation is 2 years old, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, one, I feel like we probably read it at the time. But two, there you go. I don't know. What New York Times, this is how the local paper that had the story on George Santos felt.
Yeah.
So there.
So it's true, Will Bunch writes, that the 78-year-old Giuliani is a highly problematic figure. His drinking problem is well documented, and as the Washington Post Philip Bump noted in an analysis, his sexual desires toward his employee could have been a motivation to exaggerate his political clout and influence, but there's also a lot of good reasons for the FBI to yank this out of the cold case cabinet where it never should have been filed in the first place. For one thing, bribery of a U.S. president is a highly serious offense along with treason. It's just one of two specific high crimes and misdemeanors spelled out in the Constitution.
Constitution. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you know?
Go on, Bunch. What else you got?
Yeah. And in this case, I'm struck by the details that the employee, Dunphy, and Kiriakou each provided and by how their stories are consistent with each other. In her lawsuit, the employee, Dunphy, said Giuliani not only told her to be on the lookout for millionaire pardon clients, but said they must avoid the formal application with the Justice Department, which would create a paper trail.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Now,
and
Pennsylvania-born Kiriakou served prison time for what he disclosed about CIA operations and blowing the whistle on torture of post-9/11 terror suspects. He is, in other words, a truth teller. After Dunphy's lawsuit last week, he was interviewed by Democracy Now!'s Amy Goodman and revealed he met personally with Giuliani and others at the Trump Hotel in January 2021. Interestingly, a Giuliani associate said, "We had to meet at noon because the mayor had a drink or two or five earlier in the day." He went with his lawyer to meet Giuliani, and after some chit-chat, Kiriakou says, "Finally, I said, so Mr. Mayor, there's this issue of a pardon," and Giuliani immediately said he needed to use the men's room and stood up and walked away. The associate then told Kiriakou he's not going to mention the pardon directly to Giuliani and that Rudy's going to want $2 million.
That's a funny,
Kiriakou never
very
got
mob
his pardon.
boss. why did he think he was going to get one of those from Trump for what?
I love that.
Guess,
you can't say that to me directly. I have to leave the room, and you have to say it to my associate, so I can deny that you asked me for a pardon.
Right. I mean, that's so lame movie land.
It really is. I mean,
right.
that's like, okay, that's from the movies?
Yeah. Hey, I didn't hear that.
And yet, it seems to have happened.
Yeah.
Or at least the allegation is it seems to have happened.
Right.
Now, do we believe
Same
his
with the
employee?
pants.
Do we believe the guy who was convicted of bribery? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I would have
think,
had a better
Jack
chance
Smith
of the
and Fannie
pardon.
Willis and Alvin Bragg have stronger cases right now.
Okay. I got to read a little more about this guy and what he was doing. I would think he would have had a better shot at a pardon from the next president than the one he was talking to. But I guess if it's on the table for cash, well, that seems like a pretty good shot. I
mean, there's other things that also didn't make any sense, and I don't have it in front of me, but there were other people talking about Rudy asking for money for pardons, and he was saying stuff like, I owe $75,000, and for $2 million he'll make it go away.
Yeah.
Well, how does that make sense for me?
I don't know.
I mean, I know it makes sense for
more...
you. You get the $2 million, but
right.
I could just, if I had that kind of money, I could just pay off the debt here.
I guess that's true. He's not a smart guy. He's just looking to make some money and take his pants off.
Right.
From time to time.
That's his legal defense, right? I was just had a drink and I was locker room talk.
Right. Yeah, sure. I guess so.
$70 million. I'll make sure the sun doesn't blow up in your lifetime.
That's something I could be doing. Sun explosion insurance.
Yeah.
Probably never.
I mean,
that's
a nice sun we got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. You know what I'm saying here?
Right. Okay. I mean, he's really is. It's very brazen, of course. All the things that he was doing. I don't know what to say. I don't know why we haven't been talking about it. I guess it's probably because there was an insurrection and we started to talk about that. There's any number of serious crimes. Yeah. This guy is constant. Well, not Rudy. I mean, Rudy also, but his boss, Trump, was involved in 800,000 different serious constitutional crimes, and we were busy figuring those out. But I'm glad you brought it up, and Will's right. There's really no reason why we shouldn't have been talking about it the whole time. But, okay, no reason we can't start again. And Nicole Dunphy, I think it was, I don't know, has given us the opportunity to do so again. So thanks, I guess. And we'll talk about it some more on Wednesday.
Yeah, I guess we will.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. No, seriously, man, we were wondering during the break, why do they insist on normalizing everything? I didn't mean to sort of interrupt the flow of things, but I guess we had the chance that presented itself in the middle of his presentation of his regular raft of stories, and I do think we got to most of the things that he had on tap for us, but I really was taken aback by that Axios piece. I mean, not because I was surprised that Axios did it, really. I mean, each time they do things like this, there's a little bit of, renewed shock and surprise. Like, I can't believe this is really happening. But it's just so, this seemed like such a crystalline presentation of the problem of normalizing everything. Like, and I guess for the sake of clarity, maybe, it might pay to go over some of the bullet points. I didn't want to do that in the middle of Greg's discussion and use up all of his time when I could use up all of your time later by reading these bullet points of just how, I mean, it's one, his platform is insane to begin with. And two, it's just insane to dedicate time to trying to explain what his platform is. When his platform is gimmitarianism personified. I want to beat up the people I don't like, and I want you to be able to, more importantly, I think you people should be able to beat up the people that you don't like, and you should use the power of the presidency. That's my idea. I'm going to use the power of the presidency because power, it's the thing that the president has. And I'm going to give it to you. It's not about me. It's about you. You should have the power to beat up people that you don't like. And if you think people that you don't like are going to beat you up, you should be able to shoot them. That's essentially the Republican platform. And, then they divide it up into little chunks. Well, what about education? It clearly isn't about beating up students that we don't like or shooting students we don't like. What are we going to? Well, in that case, we'll metaphorically do it. The teachers who teach the things like the gay stuff and the trans things and whatever it is we don't like, we're going to get rid of all of that. And also, no more of this stuff about the blah people, as my friend Rick Santorum calls them. And we're gonna talk about the people who do good things, the white ones. So that's how we're gonna handle things. And that's really the whole platform. But they treat it as though, we're a political publication. We're gonna put forward his platform. And then again, that they confuse themselves. The writer says, well, why the story matters is that things are coming into clearer focus. But the reality check is they're really not coming into clearer focus. But by the way, in between they're coming into clearer focus and they really haven't is 6 bullet points. Well, bullet points, that means clarity. That equals clarity, right? Here are the things he says he's going to, and it's nothing that it's unclear. It's only unclear when you then normalize it and say, well, he's proposing that everybody in America has to give him a free pizza whenever they meet him on the street. I don't know why that is, but his fans love it. And so therefore he's proposing it. It's just unclear how he's going to implement it. Well, that's like, that's the ultimate normalizing. Well, no. One, he can't demand that anybody give him free pizza every time you meet him on the street. And 2, where are people going to get the pizza? But that's too much normalization. He's asking for a vermin supreme level, idiotic thing. So I don't know what to tell you. Oh, and I have a note here from Scott Anderson who says, piano music just took me out. What do you mean? I don't know exactly, but we'll find out when there's more complaints about that. What are you all hearing? Piano music? Did Justice hit a button at World Headquarters? The World Headquarters is here. The West Coast office. All I can do is keep talking because I can't hear the piano music. So maybe this is accompaniment, or maybe you're not hearing any of it. But how perfect is that, right? Why it matters to Axios that a guy is proposing making himself dictator of America, king for life, should be wiped out by piano music, because it doesn't matter. They think it matters. I think it doesn't. So here's what they listed. They went ahead and did the whole thing. Oh, now my mom is going to climb in. Getting classical piano, not you, suddenly. So not me at all. So this is a huge waste of time, except for the fact that it'll be podcast. Okay, all I can do for that is I can message Justice about that, but you'll have to bear with me as I type this. Let's see. Does it matter if there's spelling errors in this if I do this? I don't know. About classical piano music broadcasting instead of the show. Exclamation point, I think, really, doesn't it warrant an exclamation? Lonesome sad piano at that, says Scott Anderson. All right, and I have to say, okay, acknowledged, because I can't even say it on the air and have him hear that. So, all right, hold on a minute. We'll figure this out. Okay. And I'll say we're texting Justice about it and say, see what happens with that. In the meantime, we continue to record so that we can at least give you this later on. All right. So as I said, we'll spend this time on the things that matter that don't matter, according to Axios. So just to read you the text of this thing. Former President Trump's second-term governing plans, which I didn't even know he had any. But apparently all it is when they link to, okay. Well, Justice Now says, all good now. Don't know what happened there, but everything's good now. So all of you didn't miss anything. I talked my way through the whole interlude, but I made sure to say only stuff that didn't matter at all. It was complete garbage. And you'll see when you listen to the podcast later, I promise you it's true. Okay. So we were on the topic of Axios and their weird approach to covering Trump. And just because it really crystallizes the problem that, I don't know. I guess they have to continue to give their reporters work to do to justify keeping them on the payroll. And maybe that's ultimately a good thing, because otherwise they're laying off reporters, and we're all sad about that. But here's what they're producing with their money. Former President Trump's second-term governing plans, and that's linked to another story from Axios. Again, you wonder, honestly, if you're really reading this thing critically, you're like, well, what governing plans? What are you talking about? I actually do want to see what you linked to when you refer to President Trump's second-term governing plans. What's the basis of your saying that he has any? And the basis of it is Sophia Kai's previous article called Trump's New Strongman Agenda as Legal Woes Mount. And is it just them? Are they pulling this from CNN and the town hall? I really don't know where it all comes from now that I think about it, but they begin that one. But same format too, the why it matters. Former President Trump's anger at his legal problems now dominates his grievance-driven campaign, fueling a tear-it-all-down agenda that seems to make him seeks to make him the most powerful chief executive in generations, which again, it's like flirt a little more with actually getting it and then pull back at the last second. And there's only one sentence, so there's not a lot of last seconds here. But the sentence begins correctly in the sense that this is about Trump and his anger at his legal problems, and it dominates what is a grievance-driven campaign fueling a tear-it-all-down agenda. Like, okay, this is a serious threat to democracy by a mentally unstable grievance monster. And then it's like the end of the sentence is, well, he translates it into an agenda that seeks to make him the most powerful chief executive in generations. That's normalizing. Well, he's seeking to shift the balance of power as between the different branches of government. I mean, when you say the most powerful chief executive in generations, how many generations are we talking about exactly? And the answer, if you want to quantify it, is, I don't know how many generations it would be, but who was the last chief executive to be this powerful, the way he's describing it? A tear-it-all-down agenda, right? A grievance-driven agenda. And the answer is George, not Washington, George, Rex, King George III. I mean, we've never had a chief executive, president or king, that, had this sort of tear-it-all-down agenda, grievance-driven, and accruing that much executive power to himself. The whole idea, remember we're gonna teach everybody the 1776 curriculum, which of course taught everybody that when a person like this takes power here in these territories, you depose him. That's the agenda. Depose that person. Do we tar and feather him? Do we hang him if we get our hands on him? What do we do? I don't know. But the whole point is you're justified in taking up arms to get rid of this person. If he sends his supporters and agents here or to your neighborhood or whatever to try and reimpose his authority against your rejecting it, you should organize into little groups and fire your weapons at them and kill his agents, kill his supporters. We did that. That's the revolution. I'm not talking about anything crazy here. We teach this as these are the heroes of America, right? And we commemorate them. And years later, if you have if you're provably a descendant of one of the people who went out there to kill Trump supporters, we have a little society for you. You might be, if you're interested in using these pronouns, you make yourself a daughter of the American Revolution. All we're saying is when you get to dictatorial situations like that, we as Americans, apparently up to now anyway, have been duty bound to celebrate the heroism of the people who would go out and shoot that guy's supporters. Right? I mean, am I describing it incorrectly? I don't think so. I know it's shocking. I changed the name. Instead of King George III and his supporters, and gee whiz, it's not really a supporter thing, and it was a nation, it was a state action, and so therefore somehow different. Not really. Anyway, I just find it interesting that they sort of end up normalizing this. Well, he's just trying to accrue, he wants to reset the balance of power between the three branches. And she does the same exercise last time. So I guess, because this is fairly important, why it matters is, like I said, we're opposed to dictatorship. But why Axios says it matters, just going back to again, all I'm doing here, just to clarify, I'm reading you the linked justification in the article that I was going to read you about why, what's her name? Sophia Kai feels justified in saying that former President Trump has any second term governing plans. It's because he said, this is what I'm going to do. But all he ended up saying was, I'm angry about my legal problems and I want to seize total power in the United States. Why it matters. Again, she's going to take a stab at why it matters. Why it matters is we have a constitution. We fought a revolution. We, threw off supposedly the tyranny of the British crown, although now we all love them for whatever reason and watch on CNN when another one of them gets crowned. Now it's just adorable now that we've had this war and 200 years have passed, but apparently we have to do it again now. It'll be despicable here in the United States for if you're successful in throwing off the Trump troops. That is, it'll be embittering, and we'll feel bad about it for about 100, 150 years. And then I guess later on it'll be adorable again when Donald Trump the 19th paints his face orange when his father dies, and everybody gets to watch. I don't know. That's, I guess, what we do here. At least that's been the pattern. But why it matters, we're opposed to dictatorship, generally speaking. But that's too obvious. So why did it matter that Sophia Kai thought he had a presidential agenda? Trump continues to blast prosecutors, witnesses against him, political foes, and others. But recently, he's tapped into a heated mix of old and new rhetoric to describe how he'd attack what he calls the deep state. That's actually not even a particularly good answer of why it matters. It misses the point, obviously. I mean, that's in the first instance. So why it matters, again, is dictatorship is bad, and we're all supposed to know that. And Trump plans to be a dictator, and he's saying outright that he would be, and we don't know what to do with it. But this is interesting. So he's tapped into a heated mix of old and new rhetoric. No, it's the same, but there are some different names that he gets to yell at now, and that makes it new rhetoric. And then some bullet points to make it look like she knows what she's talking about. Here they are. In criticizing the Manhattan DA who charged him with 34 criminal counts, Trump last week, and this is printed in, what's the date on this? April 20th is when this is from. So mid-April, Trump vowed sweeping investigations of Marxist prosecutors. This comes up again in the current article, with an eye towards replacing them with conservatives. He proposed giving the president the authority to hire and fire federal workers at will. That also is reflected here. So basically, it's the same list of things, actually, which is truly amazing. So really, I don't know. Here, I guess we get the chance to say, all right, so the linked evidence that he has a governing agenda is actually, one, not new, and two, relisted in this article. So this is a warmed over version. We've already been over this ground. This writer has already told us this stuff. So here it is again. So Trump's second term governing plans, allegedly coming into clearer focus, which they're not, and she says so later, as he lays out a vision for a dramatic expansion of federal power, particularly the presidency. Taking us back to, a monarchy, essentially. Why it matters. In public statements, I read you this before, videos and posts on his campaign website, Trump complains about a Washington swamp, but lays out a plan that would give him, as president, more control of virtually every facet of life in America. Zoom in. Trump's plans go well beyond the provocative promises he made during his recent CNN town hall to pardon nearly all of the convicted January 6th rioters. There have been about 500. And to immediately broker an end to the war in Ukraine. And there's so much more. It goes so far beyond it that I now will give you 2 bullet points, which are actually those 2 points repeated. Viz, as a matter of fact. Bullet number 1. Such pardons would effectively nullify what Attorney General Merrick Garland has called the Justice Department's most far-reaching and important investigation in its history. So that's the January 6th one. It goes far beyond pardoning January 6th rioters and ending the war in Ukraine, or brokering an end to the war in Ukraine. So much so that the first bullet point is the thing I said first, pardoning all the January 6th rioters. And the second one is Trump's comments on Ukraine were in line with his opposition to continued military aid to help that nation resist Russia's invasion. So, again, they go far beyond January 6th in Ukraine. For example, there's January 6th and then Ukraine. Oh. Now, she goes on then to say, those moves would be extremely controversial, but generally within a president's authority. I mean, yeah, pardons are supposedly within a president's authority, but not, according to the Federalist Papers, not when it's to cover up his own crimes, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have anything to say, I don't think, about Ukraine. They had no idea about that. But much of Trump's agenda, however, would represent an unprecedented power grab by the executive branch. That's usually like, oh my gosh, we should sit up and take notice kind of thing. Driven by far-right conservatism and Trump's grievances. Now imagine, you've already said supposedly why it matters, and then you got it wrong. But I mean, once you then come back and say, okay, well, the first two things could be controversial, but they're generally considered to be within the president's authority. But a lot of things that he is proposing are actually outside of his authority. It would be a huge, unprecedented power grab by the executive branch. Bad thing. Driven by far-right conservatism and Trump's personal grievances. Bad thing. No stop to say, well, why that matters is, again, as I saw stated very well over the weekend, somebody on social media saying, well, why it matters is, even if you agree with the guy now, later on, if you have any disagreements with him, he may murder you, and there's really nothing you could do about it. That's a bad thing about dictatorship. We ordinarily don't have to say that. It's shorthand to say, well, he's proposing dictatorship. Oh. Well, why is that bad? Well, because you could get killed in that for no particular reason, and you would have no rights. It's complete erasure of all constitutional rights for everybody, even his supporters. And if you find yourself in disagreement with even one thing, you could be killed and disappeared forever for it. Why it matters? That is the thing. Well, anyway, what are we talking about in particular? These moves would be extremely controversial, but generally within the president's authority. Then here come the ones that are not within the presidential authority. Federal workforce. He wants to give the president the authority to hire and fire federal workers at will. Not a new idea, but now a part of a broad effort to clean out investigators and officials he sees as disloyal or who have questioned his conduct. Like I said, find yourself in disagreement with him over something, you're out. I'm for the tough on crime thing. I'm for us, being able to send the cops to beat people that are disfavored in one way or another. I'm for being allowed to shoot my guns in any direction I feel like, unless I hit somebody that he personally was friends with. But that's the problem. Eventually you say, well, I thought I had the freedom to shoot my guns wherever I wanted to. I didn't know I hit Rudy Giuliani. Right. Well, now you're going to be executed for that. Dang, but I was on your side. Yeah, well, tough luck. There's really no appeal. Even though, as it turns out, we have on video that you missed Giuliani and he shot himself when he was drunk. But the point is we wanted to blame it on you, and that's that. And there's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, why it matters. Right. Education. As part of a sweeping plan for the federal government to exert more control of education, Trump wants to fire, quote, radical left officials who accredit universities. This is an interesting power grab. I don't know exactly who it is it's lookupable. Anyway, who accredits universities? You always find that stuff out, right? When somebody's about to lose their accreditation. But, the idea that the president of the United States should be able to say, hire and fire all the people who accredit universities. Why? So that you can say, all right, Harvard, you think you're so cool? We're going to take away your accreditation. No, that's crazy. It's the leading university in the country and has been for 200 years. You can't just pull their credit. No one will believe it. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to replace everybody who accredits universities and we'll put Trump people in there. We're going to accredit the new college thing down there in Florida that, what's his name, DeSantis, who's a loser, by the way, wants to do. And we'll accredit that. And Hillsdale, we're going to accredit them, but we're taking it away from Harvard and Yale and the places like that, like University of Pennsylvania that gave me my diploma or whatever, but mine is good and everybody else's is bad. That's a new one on me. Like, there's no role for the president in deciding who will be accrediting universities. But also they're going to reward schools that abolish tenure for teachers, eliminate many college administrators, and remove diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as well. And by the way, we're doing that to Harvard, even though they're private, and even though we like the private property things. If it belongs to somebody else, we don't like it. We're going to get rid of it. So there you go. Law enforcement and intelligence, you know the plans here. Trump, who's facing a range of criminal charges, said after he was indicted in New York that he wanted to defund the Justice Department and the FBI. That might have been an exaggeration. Thanks for helping him out. But Trump does want his brand of politics to reshape the Justice Department and U.S. intelligence. He's vowed to get rid of Marxist prosecutors and create an auditing system to monitor U.S. intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens, unless they're the ones we don't like, in which case you can spy on them. You know who they are, Antifa and black peoples. So, next up, gender issues. You know where he is on that. But also, it's a little more expansive than no calling people by their stupid names. Only the ones I give them are the ones that can be new. He wants the DOJ to investigate Big Pharma, because everybody hates Big Pharma, right? Why though? Because them and the big hospital networks, of course, to determine whether they have deliberately covered up the long-term side effects of sex transitions. And he also wants to boot hospitals or providers from Medicaid and Medicare if they offer gender-affirming care. So just wanted you to know that the president says is going to have a direct say on what medical care you can and can't get, and whether or not people who give it to you, despite the fact that he, the president, thinks it's not good, then your doctors are no longer allowed to be doctors. And also, maybe we'll send them to Guantanamo. I don't know. Crime. Trump wants to use the U.S. military to go after drug cartels and street crime. Big problem. Posse comitatus. All clearly violative of, directly violative of everything that all the founding fathers wrote about standing armies and how they should be used inside the United States. But to hell with them. They were all dumb and stupid, and they're not as smart as me. I'm a very genius kind of a guy. And, think about that, right? We're going to throw that whole effing thing out about using a standing army to patrol the streets of the United States and keep the populace in line at the behest of the president, on the personal orders of the president. Why it matters? Well, it could affect various aspects of American life. There you go. So why it matters? Because it stands everything on its head and reverses the American Revolution in favor of installing a new king, essentially. But he hasn't said it was going to be hereditary. He hasn't said so. So therefore, normalizing. It's just a rebalancing of the powers between the branches. Housing. Did you even realize he had a housing agenda? He wants to eliminate an Obama-era rule because it's an Obama-era rule. What is that rule? It requires cities and local governments to address residential segregation and poverty in order to receive federal housing grants. Get rid of that. We want to be able to give away grants for no reason at all to anybody who wants it, by which I mean people who I know who say, give me the grants instead of building housing, and that'll solve the problems. And on guns, Trump wants national concealed carry reciprocity, which would allow people with a concealed carry permit in their home state to have that privilege in any other state. In other words, a national gun control law, which would not control any guns. But, for all of you people who are like, it's all about the states and states' rights. Well, I want to erase all of them because no state should have the right to tell other people from other states that we don't want that in this state. That's, it's a way of rebalancing the separation of powers, to be sure. Then they go into the intrigue, which isn't necessarily a regular feature of all their things, but they did include one. Trump has taken credit for the Supreme Court overturning abortion rights under Roe v. Wade. Why is that intrigue? I don't know. A decision made possible by 3 Trump-appointed justices. Bullet point, but he hasn't said whether he'd sign a federal abortion ban, as many conservatives want, or embrace a law like Florida's ban after 6 weeks of pregnancy, one of the nation's strictest abortion laws. It was pushed by DeSantis, Trump's chief rival, for the GOP nomination. So the intrigue is, will he endorse a DeSantis-endorsed law? That's the intrigue. Not, is it crazy? Is it insane? Is it going to kill people? et cetera, et cetera. And the other intrigue, Trump has said abortion is a losing issue for conservative Republicans, but he still wants their votes. So the intrigue, how will he make it work? Now the reality check that I told you about earlier. Many of Trump's ideas are outlined in broad strokes without details of how they'd be implemented or funded, which, remember the premise of the article is it's coming into clearer focus. Answer, no, it's not. And two, of course, the reality check is almost everything that he's proposing is unconstitutional. And beyond that, more than just facially unconstitutional, directly in opposition to the principles upon which the Constitution was drafted and founded and ratified. And there's no mechanism for it whatsoever, and it would destroy all the balances and checks and balances that keep so far have kept our country functioning. Why that matters? That's the reality check, actually. But how's he going to pay for it? Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. All right, yeah, we've reached the end of that insane piece, but, almost. There is one last thing. But again, just to sort of remind you, I just found it rather remarkable that, talk about falling back on old bad habits. Did they really, this is what you have to say about the proposals that are out there, to the extent that they're proposals at all, to take over every aspect of American life, essentially, is, we don't know how he's going to pay for it. Which one is like, okay, come up with a new excuse. Usually, maybe I should be appreciative, right? Usually that's something you use against Democrats who then, have provided a detailed proposal that also sometimes anyway includes how we are going to pay for it. But they always say things like that about detailed proposals, but to work within the confines of the constitutional system to fine tune something and implement a new policy under the regular same three branches of government kind of, at least ostensibly a democracy. We want to implement this policy, and we'll see whether we can get, the majority of both houses of Congress to vote for it. But then they say, but how are you going to pay for it? Okay, that makes a certain, it's actually annoying and stupid, but it makes a certain amount of sense. Like, okay, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to raise some taxes, or we're going to divert some spending from this subject area to that subject area, and, it'll maybe be unpopular, but we think we have the votes to do it, and we think in the end, once it's implemented and people begin to enjoy the benefits of it, it will actually become rather popular, like Obamacare did, et cetera, et cetera. That's the normal course of events here. So on the one hand, it's sort of like, I guess now they're at least applying the same dumb knee-jerk response to Republican proposals. How are you going to pay for it? On the other hand, what if you had the latitude as Democrats earlier on to say, we think we're going to we're going to tinker a little bit with insurance schemes, and we think that it should be against the law to drop people from their insurance for stupid reasons or pre-existing conditions, whatever, same difference. Oh, yeah? Well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we thought that perhaps we would set up this scheme or that scheme, and maybe we, collect the mandatory minimum from everybody. Oh, well, that's a tax. Yes, no. All right. But you have to work that one through the courts, right? But if you're saying, well, we're going to seize total power, and from now on, you're not allowed to teach this, and if you do, you're going to jail, and you're not allowed to seek that kind of health care, and if you do, you're going to jail, and so's the doctor, and you're not allowed to try to prevent discrimination in housing, and if you do, you'll go to jail too. And if you complain about having been discriminated against, you'll go to jail as well. We're going to do that. Oh, yeah? Well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, it's an interesting question. For that, we're going to use the constitutional system where we vote on things. And no, of course not. I'm seizing total power. How are you going to pay for it? Anybody ask Hitler, how are you going to pay for this? Yeah, I understand you want to build camps and exterminate millions of Jews, gypsies, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody that doesn't fit into your worldview is too many to name. Well, yes, that's the plan. How are you going to pay for it? Yeah. I guess, was there ever a question about that? Did whatever remained of the German Reichstag, did they say, well, we will find a legal. That's one of the, weird and scary parts about it is they did normalize everything and they said, well, we really do need to find a mechanism to pay for it. Or did they just say, we order this to happen? How are you going to pay for it? I'm not. Well, then I'm not going to do it. Well, then I'm going to shoot you. Well, then you got a deal. I'm going to do it, as a matter of fact. Or I read your book and I thought it was great. I'm going to do it. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it, Mussolini? I don't know. Trains are running on time, though, so I don't know. Maybe it's a self-licking ice cream cone. How am I going to pay for it? It doesn't have to be paid for. Everything's on time. Everyone loves it so much. How are you going to pay for it? I'm going to seize total control in the United States and make people do it. And if they don't get paid for it, first of all, you've been covering me for how long? Don't you know that I'm not going to pay for it? I'm not going to pay for it. Maybe the government isn't even going to pay for it. And of course, then there's the second level of, that's really not the big concern here. How are you going to pay for it? The real problem is you've overthrown the United States government and replaced its checks and balances and constitutional democracy with the personal rule, grievance-based at that, personal rule of Donald Trump. That's actually the reality check. Right? Everything he's proposing is not only unconstitutional, like in the small ways, like, it's unconstitutional and that's bad because you won't want to deal with the slippery slope of allowing this, that, or the other thing, of sneaking around the Constitution for this good thing, because later on it means somebody else could sneak around it for this bad thing. And we understand that. And so therefore unconstitutional is bad, but just unconstitutional in a sense of, well, there's no rights or guarantees of rights or life, liberty, pursuit of anything at all for anybody if the person who has seized control doesn't like them. Reality check, that's bad. Why it matters? That's an awful thing. Everyone will get killed. It's a terrible system of government. We overthrew it years ago in favor of this one, which we all appear to like. And it doesn't just mean, as long as we still have fireworks and sales on Chevrolets, everything's still working. No, you can really destroy this thing. And this guy is proposing that we destroy it. Why it matters? Oh, it's so crazy, it just might work. I guess we've all been Chuck Toddified in this. And I can't blame Sophie Kai all by herself for that one. So I said there was one more thing in here, by the way. They threw in a what they're saying section. So they had a quote about it. And why not at this point throw in a quote from somebody who says Trump is bad? Okay, fine. Who should it be? Norm Ornstein. Norm Ornstein, he's been on this beat forever. What does he have to say? Well, a little disappointing. What Trump is proposing for 2025, he says, is the trappings of a democracy, but it's a Potemkin village, said Norman Ornstein, an emeritus scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Maybe, sort of, kind of, but it's not the trappings of a democracy. It's actually I will eliminate the trappings of democracy and Potemkin Village. Like, what? I mean, that's a cool phrase. Potemkin Village, you might be talking about the freedom cities. I forgot to mention that. That came up under cities and housing, where there's not only, do we want to, oh yes, that's right, because it had its own bullet point. Housing bullet point was, he wants to eliminate the Obama era rule about, requiring cities and local governments to address residential segregation and poverty in order to qualify for federal housing grants. But then there's a second one, cities/housing. I forgot the total, futuristic dystopia angle on things. His quantum leap to revolutionize the American standard of living, that's a quote, includes baby bonuses to create a new baby boom. They'll pay you to have babies, which, I don't know when, as Rick Santorum says, when that was happening for blah people, that was a bad thing. Do you know that we pay them more? This is not Santorum, but Trump probably agrees. We pay them money. We get more in welfare if they had babies. So guess what's going to happen? They're going to go out there, going to have babies, and they'll just be doing it on the federal dole. All right. So why are you now proposing baby bonuses so that there's a new baby boom? Oh, that's because that's for white people. There needs to be more white babies so that there's not so many black ones, is what I'm saying. But, well, it won't actually mean that there's less. Yeah, but we'll wipe them out in terms of numbers because we'll be paying for the white ones and punishing black people for having their own babies. That we're going to take away their food stamps unless they work. And if they're working, then they won't have time to have so many babies, and they won't be able to take care of any of them. And what? Holy, are you out of your effing mind? Oh, well, I haven't gotten to the dystopia part yet. Hold on, because not only are we going to have a quantum leap to revolutionize the American standard of living, including baby bonuses, but I'm going to create 10 new freedom cities in the U.S. And I don't know if, at this point you've had to take my word for it because I haven't referred back to a source. But the freedom cities is this idea that he's going to build new American cities. Why are we doing this? Because, of course, current American cities all hate Donald Trump, and they can't wait to get rid of him. And those are the blue islands, even in red deserts in, ruby red states. There are blue pockets, and where they exist are in the cities. So why don't we get rid of those cities? Or just like everything else, right? On Twitter, all the Twitter is against me because I'm conservative, and we got to get rid of the Twitters. And in the meantime, until Elon Musk takes over and ruins the Twitters, we're going to start our own. Truth Social. YouTube is biased against conservatives. We're going to start our own. Act Blue is raising too much money. We're going to start our own. Daily Kos is too good at organizing progressives. We're going to start our own. Right? How many times have we been through this? This is the same thing here. Cities are against us. We're going to start our own. He's going to build cities from scratch in deserts or in unoccupied federal land is his plan. Going to raise it from nothing. And all the people who want to live in big cities and have Starbucks but are afraid to admit it because it means that they have to live around black and brown people, now they're going to be able to do it just around white people and have guns and cities and Starbucks. And I don't think that's really going to work. And even if it did, why would you want to do it? And, okay, sure. How are you going to pay for it, you might ask? Trillions of dollars worth of building and investment. Well, the federal government is going to pay for it. And I just happen to be the guy, and so is my son-in-law, who builds these buildings that makes what looks like a city, even if no one wants to live in it. And then we'll raid the treasury, and we'll all keep the gold bars from Fort Knox. And you'll get empty buildings, and it'll be a nightmare, and da-da-da-da. Why it matters. Reality check. How are you going to pay for it? Ugh. That's where we are. And then, of course, Potemkin Village. It's a Potemkin Village. Well, it would be a Potemkin Village. Those things would be. But that's not really the biggest problem with all of this, Norm. And he's usually on the ball. And, I mean, this is one slice of what he had to say. And I don't know what the context of the rest of it was. And maybe there was a better quote. But it's not the trappings of democracy. And the Potemkin Village is perhaps one of the scariest things that he has in there. But, in the meantime, it's violative of everything we supposedly fought the Revolutionary War for. And they seem to love that crap. They talk about it all the time. It's their favorite. But, Gimitarianism in the execution of it. Well, what we liked was that you could shoot your enemies. What we didn't like was that we had to listen to other people that we disagreed with later on. And that was a really unfortunate side effect of democracy, and we're going to get rid of it. And that's where we stand, and let's normalize it. And it just might work, and how are you going to pay for it? Anyway, so let's see. I wanted to share some other things with you. There were definitely other things to get to. And I got hung up on that one because it's crazy and I can't stand it anymore. But I wanted to read you this one. This is a good setting for the week. We're probably going to be discussing it tomorrow. It should be in the background of our discussions with Joan. And it is Catherine Rampell for the Washington Post. As an opinion piece, which is interesting. What would U.S. default actually look like? She asks. And the answer, of course, is financial Armageddon. So how so? What do you mean? I don't think we've spent enough time on it except by saying, well, if you follow if you connect the dots, no money anymore. Nothing means anything. Like, why is this paper stuff worth anything? Well, there's a whole system behind it. And, we've heard about it one day. Way back in the past, it was because there was a certain amount of gold. And now it's just because there's fiat currency and we just say it's worth something. And Arliss Bunny has told us all about it and described it in terms of modern monetary theory. But even before there was that, there was the idea that, well, the point is it's got value not because there's gold backing it and that you could bring this paper at any time to a bank and demand gold in exchange for it. That used to be the case. Now it isn't. But really the reason why it still worked, despite the fact that we decoupled from the gold, was essentially that they said, well, the federal government will never default on its debt. You'll always get paid out in something that millions of people still consider to be valuable. If we take that away, and the government will no longer guarantee that they'll back that paper stuff, then you begin to see, hey, maybe it does have no intrinsic value. And if it doesn't, all the things that depended on it and all the people who traded in their own paper based on its relative value to our paper, it all falls apart, right? Financial Armageddon. Yes, it actually is that bad. For months, you've heard warnings about the very bad things that could happen if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling. U.S. government default, market crash, global financial crisis. Again, Catherine Rampell wrote back on May 4th, that probably feels abstract, maybe even hyperbolic. Worldwide financial meltdown? Really? Well, I spent recent days talking to financial experts and former government officials about the potential fallout. I wanted to better understand the channels through which panic and losses could spread and precipitate financial Armageddon, as one former Federal Reserve official dubbed it. Other phrases that came up in interviews: nightmare scenario, bankruptcies that rival those in the Great Depression, and we might have to go back to trading beads. Yes. Okay. To be clear, there are many unknowns. What color would these beads be? How are you going to pay for it? Right? All sorts of unknowns. Be skeptical of ultra-precise forecasts that quantify down to 1/10 of a percentage point how much, say, unemployment would rise. Consequences will also vary depending on what markets think will happen. A 24-hour default during which a debt limit deal appears imminent is different from one in which everyone believes lawmakers may have repudiated some debt forever. One useful, and that's true, you got to keep that in mind. I'm sure that does make a difference. One useful lens for thinking through possible consequences was suggested by Richard Berner, a senior Treasury official during the 2011 debt limit crisis. The global financial system is like an upside-down pyramid, and the tip of that pyramid is the U.S. Treasury market. Everything else rests upon it, he told me. With these disclaimers, here's a summary of what market experts relayed. Our scenario assumes the U.S. government fails to pay for not only key services such as Social Security checks and military salaries, but also principal or interest on at least some U.S. Treasury securities. It's unclear whether the government has technical capacity to effectively prioritize payments anyway, or if ratings agencies would care, right? On to the consequences in 7 terrifying steps. And because they're terrifying, Shall we use the horror dramatic music? I think so. Minor key, I think, for terrifying steps. Ready? The first, treasuries get downgraded, as does virtually every other asset on Earth. U.S. Treasury debt has long been considered risk-free, with the relative riskiness of other assets benchmarked against it. So the sudden realization that treasuries are unsafe cascades through other assets, including bonds of U.S. corporations. These bonds would be downgraded, making it more expensive for companies to borrow. I mean, that's one takeaway from it, right? It's more expensive for companies to borrow. Another takeaway, maybe she gets to it later on. Not really sure. But if you ever took a block of your money and said, well, I may or may not be willing to speculate in something crazy like cryptocurrency, or I may or may not be interested in something else somewhat less crazy, but still risky like stocks and, bonds, as they mention here. But rather, I would like to take them and buy treasury debt or buy bonds, U.S. savings bonds, right? The interest rate is low, but it's slow and steady. Maybe I could park a whole bunch of money there if I have a whole bunch of money and know that, okay, it'll never get to be less. It won't grow, at the rates that they're promising for cryptocurrency or stocks for that matter, but it'll grow and it'll always be there and I won't lose it. And that is a great comfort to a lot of people, and a lot of people will put their money in things like that, or they give it to kids as gifts, right? When they're born, or they have momentous rites of passage or coming of age ceremonies of various cultures, etc., graduations, whatever, what have you. It give you a savings bond. Boring as hell, but you'll never lose money on it. Well, how about if you did? And how about if you lost all of it, for instance, or at least everything that they said they would pay you, or they say, well, we might give you face value of it back, but no interest on it. Or we'll give you the purchase price back. Somebody bought you a $50 savings bond when you were a kid. They paid $25 for it. It was going to mature to $50, and then we'd pay you interest after a certain point. But here's the $25 back if you want it. Or to hell with you, all you have is a funky-looking piece of paper with some weirdo's face on it, and what are you going to do with that? Anybody who wants to buy the drawing from you can do it, but it's not worth any money. Oh, but also companies would find it more expensive to borrow. Okay, number 2, interest rates rise for U.S. consumers. That was happening anyway. Also businesses and the government, and it becomes more expensive to buy a house or invest in new equipment. Or impossible, for that matter, to buy a house. I want to buy this house. Well, that'll be $250,000. Cheap house, right? Not bad for most of America. In some places, it's about twice as much as you should have to pay for a house. But around here, it'd be pretty good. All right, whatever it is, whatever it costs around here. Okay, that'll be $100,000. Okay, here's my check for $100,000. No, I need gold. These dollars, even cash, it's just funny looking pieces of paper. Expensive, more expensive to buy a house. There's no such thing as buy a house. Dig a cave out, pull some rocks out, get in an old and abandoned mine. That's your new shelter. All right. Well, I'm going beyond what she says the experts tell you. All right. So, if they decide to try to maintain the trappings of an economic system, it becomes more expensive to buy a house or invest in new equipment. Our federal debt problems, the concerns supposedly motivating default threats in Congress, also worsen as debt service costs rise. Even though, I guess at some point you'd say, do debt service costs actually rise if you say we're not going to service the debt anymore? No, not really. But then millions of people have no basis for their fortunes anymore, and everybody is just subsistence farmers from now on. You say you have billions of dollars in the bank, Bill Gates. Can you eat any of it? No? Well, then I don't have anything for you here. Okay. Okay, well, let's see. Also, merely flirting, she says, with default in 2011, by the way, increased government borrowing costs by $1.3 billion that year. So expect at least something like that to happen this year as well. Global investors, number 3, would likely sell U.S. dollar-denominated assets as confidence in them evaporates. The dollar might lose value in foreign exchange markets or lose all of its value everywhere. That's the more worrisome part. Stock markets plummet. That's a likely problem, even if you don't default. Investments that are even slightly risky become less attractive to hold amid such uncertainty. Number 5, companies holding treasuries suffer hits to both revenue and balance sheets. Companies that are reliant on interest payments for revenue might now have a cash flow problem. If you invested in a lot of U.S. bonds or treasury bills, right, they'll try to borrow more cash to cover their costs, if anyone even takes cash. But banks will want to hoard cash, not give out more loans during a crisis. Although why you would hoard worthless pieces of paper, I have no idea. So these companies may have trouble paying payroll, rent, or other expenses. This could have knock-on effects for anyone expecting payments from these cash-strapped companies, especially if you thought that the cash that they were able to give you was going to be worth anything. I mean, it's really not going any further than, well, the money supply could tighten. Yeah, but the problem is that the money supply that you do have could lose all its value. Spurred by post-financial crisis regulations, there's number 6 here. There might be a scramble to close out trades that people would otherwise hold. Yes, that's true too. Spurred by post-financial crisis regulations, treasuries are increasingly used as collateral when people engage in other kinds of transactions. For example, to back borrowing when purchasing bonds or mortgages. If that once rock-solid collateral suddenly drops in value, more collateral might be demanded right away, or the transaction might have to be closed out immediately, i.e. the loan would have to be repaid in full, or the full purchase amount for the asset delivered ASAP. This is known as a margin call. Now, imagine hordes of people being told to close out all at once because everyone's collateral has lost value. This leads to a huge sell-off across other markets because everyone is racing to get the funds their broker or lender demands in time. It would be like a global margin call, Berner said. If number 6 happens, number 7 says everyone attempts to close out their trades at once. Some of the infrastructure underpinning large parts of the financial system, called the central counterparty clearinghouses, could essentially get overwhelmed and go down. Backup plans meant to kick in may not work, as they're not really meant for a systemic shock of this kind. These clearinghouses are tightly interconnected with each other and other institutions and markets. Most people I interviewed said they are the fastest and scariest source of contagion to the rest of the world economy. That's just the early stage damage. Longer term, the United States might permanently lose its privileged economic and standing. I don't know what it's privileged economic standing, maybe is what they mean, and ability to influence global affairs as we now do. If you're not afraid yet, you should be. We get a little bit more towards what is actually problematic about default in numbers 6 and 7 there. But yes, essentially global influence around the world evaporates immediately if your currency loses all of its value and everyone loses all confidence that you will pay your debts. Then that's the end of American hegemony around the world, and something, and Republicans who are screaming, they don't respect us around the world anymore. You got to put me in, who will default on the debt. And in my absence in the federal government, all my lunatic followers will make us default on the debt instead. Yeah, fantastic for not making us a laughing stock around the world. Although maybe they're just not laughing. So maybe he has a point there. Wow, okay. So, I think that actually was like relatively calming in the sense that they just weren't talking about just how much is connected to the insistence that the United States continue to pay its debts. So anyway, along those lines, just as we close things out, we can reassure you that what we heard from Greg, probably true. Even The Hill has this to say. Brett Samuels reporting, Biden says he thinks he has authority to use the 14th Amendment on the debt ceiling. And, He very likely does, or at the very least, we're in a position where he might as well just say, I think I do, and that's all that really matters. Now, they lay it out. There's a whole argument for it, and I don't know if we've ever really been, in the last couple of years, since the last financial debt or debt ceiling crisis, talking about the 14th Amendment. But we could get into that, and maybe we'll discuss it a little bit with Joan. But in the meantime, I don't know. Like I said, I threw out there's a strategy by which Biden can and should be talking about this at this point and saying, well, if push comes to shove and they really are about to just push us over the brink, I'll use the 14th Amendment. Is it soundly constitutional? Well, under other circumstances, you might wonder about what the Supreme Court would say about that. We want to oppose Biden. We're conservatives. We want to impose a conservative agenda. We don't want to let him have this way out. We'd like to keep him over a barrel. But if push comes to shove and he makes us be the ones, if he, in full view of everyone, shifts the decision to us, do we have the stomach for pushing default as, essentially unelected and unaccountable people? We do it all the time on other things, but if it will ruin the world economy and make it impossible for you to bribe us with dollars, that might be something we consider to be just too dangerous to ourselves personally. And why not? So in the meantime, right, threaten it, say you're going to do it. In fact, go ahead and pull the trigger and do it. And I think that people can understand this. The horse trading, people don't seem to understand. But you say, listen, I don't know whether I have the right to do this or not. I think so. My lawyers tell me so. I'm going to do what you do. We're going to say we're going to try it. We'll leave it to the courts. Let the courts review it. If the courts say we can't do it, then we can't do it. I give up. I'm not going to try and countermand the courts. I'm not going to overthrow the United States government for this. But what it comes down to is, well, one, I'm going to use the 14th Amendment, and we're going to start paying out money or saying we don't have to anymore, or, whatever it is that we do, issue more debt, even though the debt ceiling hasn't been lifted. You want to sue us? Sue us. It's going to take months. And in the meantime, we'll be paying our debts. And if at the end you bring it to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says, you know what? Everybody who got paid between then and now, you weren't paid. You're zeroed out. You lose all your assets. Says me, the Supreme Court. Go ahead. Go for it.
Networksradio.com.
I'll let you do it.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I think most people can understand that, and they would also understand why the justices say, you know what, I'm not actually with Kevin McCarthy on this one after all, not with Donald Trump. Going to do my own thing. I think everybody would understand that. Okay, time now, though, to hand things off to Justice Putnam. Not that I've depressed you or anything. West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio.